All righty. Oops. I'm back, but I don't recognize it.
You're there.
I am?
Yep.
I can't see anything other than regular open council meeting.
It's Rick. Can you hear me, Your Worship?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then it worked.
Hey, Parm.
Yeah, how are you?
Good.
I know, that's what I'm saying. So is it here?
Click on that.
There it is. There. Okay, now we're good. Everybody's here already.
We're keeners.
Yeah.
Just a reminder to everybody that we are live now on YouTube.
Thank you.
Not quite.
Matt, do we need to hit start video at the bottom to be on screen or what?
Yes. Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
so that, oh, there we go. Okay, got it.
Who's got the feedback?
We got everybody here? I think so.
Mayor, I'm still trying to get the webcast to go. It says it's waiting for us, so it'll just take a minute.
Okay.
Hi, Diane. It's Matt. I just checked and it looks like it is up live on YouTube right now.
Okay, I'm looking at the portal, but it's okay on YouTube?
Yes.
Because I went to the portal and it's just spinning.
Okay. Well, we are live on YouTube. I can take care of that in the background, but
All right.
it is
Okay,
being recorded.
okay, great. I'll
Thank you.
get the agenda up.
Okay, we'll get started. Call this regular meeting of council, Town of Oliver, Monday, November 23rd, 2020. Call this meeting to order. Are there any late items to add to the agenda?
Yes, there is, Your Worship, a letter of support request from Oliver Parks and Recreation Society.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as amended by adding item K2?
So moved.
So moved.
Moved and second. Does anyone object to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. The first item is adoption of prior minutes. Number one is adoption of November 9th, 2020 regular open council meeting minutes. Can I get a mover to adopt those minutes as circulated?
So moved.
Moved,
Second.
seconded, thank you. I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Moving to item E2, adoption of November 10th, 2020 special open budget deliberation meeting minutes. Can I get a mover to adopt those minutes as circulated?
So moved.
You. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Hearing none, motion is carried. Moving to committee reports. F1, November 9, 2020, Committee of the Whole meeting minutes for receipt. Can I get a mover to receive those minutes, please?
So moved.
Moved. Thank you. Second.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Item F2, November 17th, 2020, Airport Advisory Committee meeting minutes for receipt. Can I get a mover to receive those minutes?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Item 3 is, what do we got for item 3? We got a recommendation from the Airport Advisory Committee that the Airport Advisory Committee recommend to council to direct staff to review the airport fees contained in the Fees and Charges Bylaw 1383. CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the airport committee meeting, there was a review of the budget, et cetera. And one of the items that came out of that was looking at the airport fees. So the airport advisory committee felt that it was time to look at the fees and charges that we currently have in our bylaw and are recommending to council to have staff review those in consultation with the airport manager.
Oops, let me see here, get everybody's hands. Does anybody want to speak to that at all? Or does anybody want to make the motion to endorse resolution AAC-14 2020?
I will make the motion to endorse that. And that staff be directed.
I'll second.
Seconded, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Moving to water matters. Item 1, 2021 Water Rates Bylaw. I'll pass this over to the Deputy Finance Officer, whose report is attached. And we're here for first, second, and third reading.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the November 10th Special Open Council meeting, the following resolution was adopted. That Council adopt the 2021-25 Water Operating and Capital Financial Plan as presented with a 4% rate increase, and that staff prepare the necessary bylaws. The 2021-25 Water Operating Budget included a rate increase of 4%, and the rate increases would be effective January 1st, 2021. During budget discussions, there was one amendment identified by council that council directs staff to remove the Northwest Sector town's contribution of $385,000 from the capital budget. The rate increase of 4% for 2021 is estimated to increase the average residential water user fees from $386 to $401. It is staff's recommendation that the Water Regulation Amendment Bylaw 1351.08 be read for first, second, and third time tonight. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Deputy Finance Officer. Any questions for the Deputy Finance Officer? Hearing none, would anybody like to move the motion that the Water Regulation Amendment Bylaw 1351.08 be read for a first, second, and third time?
So moved.
So moved.
Moved and
Second.
second. Any further comments, discussion?
I do.
CL?
Thank you, Worship. I would just like to remind council that this has to be a unanimous consent on this carried.
I will call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is unanimously carried. Anything to report this evening, Water Councillor Machial?
Just that budget meeting with the rest of council and very busy with everything else, but nothing to do with council.
Okay, thank you. Water Councillor Sidhu, anything to report this evening?
Just tonight's meetings.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to development permit variance permits. Item 1, development permit 215 Maple Avenue. I will pass this over to the Director of Development Services, whose report is attached.
Thank you, Worship. I'll just share my screen here. Oh, looks like I'm disabled. One sec. Matt, can you enable my screen, please? Sorry, just a sec. There we go.
There you go, Randy.
Thanks. Everyone see my screen?
Yep, I can.
Perfect, thank you. This application is for development permit 2020-09 for 215 Maple Avenue. The applicant is proposing to construct a 215 square meter building for the operation of an equipment and tool rental business. The subject property is located within the industrial development permit area of the OCP and requires approval for the design and to address landscaping requirements. This is a map showing the property in the southeast corner of town, and this is in the newer industrial subdivision. The OCP for the property is industrial, and the zoning for the property is industrial. Photos of the subject property. This is the street elevation and the rear elevation. It's currently undeveloped at this time. Some of the neighboring properties have gone before council for development permits in the previous year. Here's a site plan. You'll see there's 2 driveways off of Maple, one on the north would be the northeast and one on the northwest. There's plenty of room, so 5.6 meters on each side for vehicles to come in and out with plenty of loading space opportunities in the back. It's a small building here, a couple thousand square feet with a small loft, which I'll show you here, with plenty of parking space and a lot of space in the back for the equipment storage. I'm not sure if someone's mic is on, sort of a bit of feedback, but anyways, I'll just get into the building elevation. So you'll see the image on the left shows the rear elevation and the image on the right, the left elevation. So it's gray vinyl siding or metal siding rather, with vinyl windows. This image here on the left shows the front elevation and on the right elevation. Here's the floor plan. So as I mentioned, 2016 square feet. And then in this piece here is a loft that has a small office in it. Excuse me. And this is an image showing the overhead rendering. You'll see there's some landscaping in the front, but mainly it is an industrial property and the intention is to use it for the tool rental business as mentioned. Staff comments, the proposed development meets the intent of the industrial DP area as highlighted below. The warehouse building is modest in height, features gray metal siding with several windows and a covered. This helps to create a pleasant street image. The building will blend in well with the neighborhood as it continues to develop. A small landscaping strip with 2 small trees is provided along the middle of the property along the street, which helps to improve the aesthetic value of the property. The option for council is that council may choose to support the recommendation, council may choose not to support the recommendation, or council may choose to refer back to staff for additional information. And with that, the staff recommendation is that council approve development permit number 2020-09 and that staff be directed to issue the permit. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Director. Questions for the Director, comments? I don't see anybody. Would somebody like to make the motion that council approve development permit 2020-09 and the staff be directed to issue the permit?
I'll make that motion, please.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Schwarzenberger, Councillor Grace. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to bylaws, item 1, 2021 sewer rates bylaw. Here for first, second, and third reading, and I will pass this over to the Deputy Financial Officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the November 10th special open council meeting, the following resolution was adopted. That council adopted 2021-25 sewer operating and capital financial plan as presented with a 4% rate increase, and that staff prepare the necessary bylaws. The 2021-25 sewer operating budget included a rate increase of 4%, and that rate increase would be effective January 1st, 2021. During budget discussions, there were no amendments identified by council. The rate increase of 4% for 2021 is estimated to increase the average residential sewer user fees from $274 to $285. The staff's recommendation that the sewer amendment bylaw 1331.08 be read first for a first, second, and third time tonight. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Deputy. Any discussion, questions on this? Do I have seeing none, do I have a mover of the motion?
I'll move that sewer amendment bylaw 1331.08 be read a first, second, and third time.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. Can I get a seconder?
I'll second.
Second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to item 2, Fire Control Amendment Bylaw 1369.01. I'll pass this over to the corporate officer whose report is attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report before council is to seek your enactment of Fire Control Amendment Bylaw 1369.01. At the November 9th meeting, council gave a preliminary review to Fire Control Amendment Bylaw 1369.01, and council deferred back to staff for further review of section 7 and 15 and to review the entire bylaw for grammatical improvements with regards to he. The bylaw was reviewed, and there are amendments to section 7 that are shown in my staff report that are in red. We've changed he to they in section 7A, and there's been no change to the wording in the services under II and item 7. Under section 15, burning without a permit, at the November 9th meeting, council suggested adding additional wording that identifies a regulatory standard, such as UL, which is an American standard, or CSA, which is the Canadian standard. Amendments to section 15 are presented to council with that regulatory certification, and I included or remained or approved by the fire chief if there is an instance where a particular apparatus may require approval. The fire chief indicated that often it is a simple phone call. He doesn't see that it would be onerous on his time. As well, in section 22, regulations of fire hazards, there was an additional grammatical change from he to they. And the options before council are to give first 3 readings to the Fire Control Amendment Bylaw, or you may choose not to support the recommendation, or you may wish to refer back to staff for additional information. And the recommendation before council is that Fire Control Amendment Bylaw 1369.01 be read a first, second, and third time, and that adoption of the Fire Control Amendment Bylaw be scheduled for the December 14th, 2020 meeting. Thank you.
Any questions or discussion? don't see any hands. Oh, Councillor Ventimiglia.
I was just going to say that I think that the amendments look to be exactly what we asked for, and so I would move the proposed motion.
I will second.
Okay. Did you have a comment or question too, Councillor Mattis?
No, I was just seconding the motion.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will ask the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to item 3, Development Cost Charge Bylaw 1390. For first, second, and third reading, and I will pass this over to the Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is to introduce Development Cost Charge Bylaw 1390, which will repeal the existing Development Cost Charge Bylaw number 1172 from 2007. The Town of Oliver currently collects development cost charges in accordance with Bylaw 1172. This bylaw, through its technical appendix, was prepared in 2007 by the town and True Consulting. In 2019, True was engaged to complete a DCC bylaw update on behalf of the town. True has prepared this technical appendix to summarize the methods employed to prepare DCC Bylaw 1390. I wanted to touch a little bit on the public consultation that was done as part of this project. In conjunction with town staff, True conducted a public engagement session on March 3rd of 2020 from 1 to 2 p.m. in council chambers. At this session, it was targeted to developers in the Oliver area. Information was posted on the town's website and sent by town staff to known local developers. The following topics were covered: DCC overview, development projections, existing DCCs, existing reserves, proposed projects and DCC calculations, proposed DCCs, comparison to existing DCCs, and comparables with neighboring municipalities. Approximately 6 developers from the Oliver area showed up to the engagement session. The feedback received during the session was generally positive, and it was that the proposed projects and DCCs were reasonable. Following the stakeholder engagement session on March 4th, the town distributed a copy of the PowerPoint presentation by email to all those that were attending, and we requested comments from them. No additional comments or feedback were received from the town. With that, I will say at this time, the staff recommendation is that council give first, second, and third reading to the bylaw, and that prior to adoption, Development Cost Charge Bylaw 1390 be referred to the Inspector of Municipalities for approval. But I will pass it over to Alyssa Schultz with True Consulting. She's here to present about the findings of the DCC bylaw thus far and to give some more background on the technical side of things. Thank you, Alyssa. Go ahead.
Thank you, Randy. Thanks everyone for your time tonight. So just kind of continuing on with Randy's overview, I have come to speak at council twice earlier this year in May and June. So some of this may be, doubling up on some of the things we talked about then, but a good refresher, and then I'll talk about some of the things that have changed in the proposed bylaw since I last presented to council. So a brief overview of DCCs. Development cost charges are fees that the municipality may choose to collect from new development to help pay the cost of offsite infrastructure services that are needed to accommodate growth. What goes into preparing a bylaw? In very short order, step 1 is to determine the bylaw format. So what time frame are we looking at for the bylaw, and are we collecting these charges the same throughout the whole municipality, or are we looking at area specific charges so that the amounts may vary throughout town? Step 2 is to project the population growth, looking at how much growth is going to happen over the determined bylaw timeline. Step 3, based on the population growth, we need to look at the infrastructure, see what projects are required in that time frame to service that development, and how much of the cost of those projects can be attributed to development. Step 4 would be determine the municipal assist factor. So if a project is 100% attributed to growth, the municipality still has to pay a small portion of that to assist. And the minimum is 1%. And then step 5 is to put that all together and calculate what the actual DCCs will be for each land use category. So the proposed new DCC bylaw format would be a 10-year revolving program with a municipal-wide charge. So those are consistent with the existing bylaw. I believe in 2007, it was a 15-year revolving program. Generally, what we see and what's also recommended by the province is to go for a shorter time frame so that your population projections and your projects are a little bit more realistic. We've set a 1% municipal assist factor for all DCCs. That's consistent with the current bylaw. It also keeps it simple, it keeps it consistent. And just one more note, again, consistent with the current DCC bylaw, there are no storm drainage projects, so no storm DCCs. It should be noted that in some of the roads projects, there are small stormwater management components, but we did a review of the town's infrastructure and we didn't determine that there were any storm-specific projects that could be attributed to growth in the 10-year timeframe. So, development projections. In line with BC statistics, we've assumed growth of 1% annually, basically looking from end of 2020 to 2031. The town would be looking at an additional 593 people joining the town of Oliver. And then on the other side of that, we need to look at non-residential development. So your commercial, institutional, and industrial, they basically provide an equivalent population. So even though they may not have people living there, they have an added load on the town's infrastructure. And based on our estimates of how much development there's going to be, that's an additional 112 people. So really we're looking at 705. The existing DCCs that were created in 2007, you'll see in this left column here, that's the actual DCCs that are collected now. In the province's best practices guide, they do recommend to make minor edits annually to account for inflation, as well as if the town were to get any grant funding, so that these DCCs can be adjusted annually. So basically when we get to this point, 10 years later, at the end of that revolving program, it's less of a big jump. So just for the sake of today's exercise, if we take that 2007 number and inflate it with construction costs to today, it grows. Like for a single family, you're going from 7,500 to almost 11,000. So just a comparison there. Moving on to the projects, roads DCCs, these should be familiar from when I came and spoke with you in the spring. So we've proposed 5 roads projects. The first is Veterans Avenue Bridge, so an additional bridge crossing for the town. Similkameen Avenue reconstruction between Main and Tulameen. Station Street corridor. This is, a development hub in town. So there's a number of different areas that are flagged for roads projects. Meadows Drive, again, kind of a corridor for development. And then Ticklenuit Northern Extension to widen and extend an existing road, again, to service an area that's flagged for future development. So to calculate the DCCs, and I'll try not to get into too much detail here, but we basically look at the total cost estimate for those projects, and then we look at what percentage of those can be attributed to growth. So for these roads projects, it's between 8 and 25% that we can basically charge as DCCs. There's a 1% municipal assist factor. We subtract by existing reserves, and we essentially come out with a per capita DCC for roads. Roads is done by trip ends instead of by person. Basically means how many vehicle trips are generated in each kind of development, but it's quite similar to per capita. Same thing for sanitary. These are the same projects that we came to you with in the spring. They're based on the 2018 sanitary capital plan, Fairview to Sawmill Road, sanitary improvements, Main and Station Street between Hillside and Bank improvements, Similkameen Avenue between Tulameen and Airport. That one overlaps with one of the roads projects. An additional crossing at Fairview Road. Oh, sorry, that's rehab of the existing crossing, Fairview Road. For Avenue to the influent lift station improvements, influent drum screen #2, so basically improving the capacity of the existing lift station, and then adding an additional area for reclaimed water irrigation based on the amount of growth in the next 10 years. Again, looking at those cost estimates, and then we determine how much of those projects can be attributed to growth. Most of these benefit growth and existing population quite equally. So those come out at 8.6%. The reclaimed water irrigation facilities, that cost estimate and that amount of area was determined based on how much growth we anticipate. So that one's 100% attributed to DCCs. Again, municipal assist factor of 1, subtracted by DCC reserves. So for the sanitary system, we have a cost per capita of 639. Water projects, again, these are the same as what we presented in the spring. An additional river crossing at Sawmill Road, Park Drive looping, Main Street North looping, to conduit backup power to one of the pump stations, primary supply main to reservoir, Main Street between Bank and School improvements, and a water reservoir expansion. While these projects aren't really centralized around specific developments, they improve the overall hydraulic capacity of the system. Again, this is based on the 2018 water capital plan. So they are essentially equally attributed to growth and the current population. So they come in 10.4 to 11% attributed to DCCs. So our DCC cost per capita for water comes out to 187. Now, parkland acquisition and improvements, DCCs. So again, we came to you in May and June earlier this year, and parks was the topic of discussion. Had some questions, council had some questions and concerns about how we calculated the parks DCCs. The main concerns there were that we had used the rural and urban population to determine the parks DCCs. And also our draft bylaw only identified one park site, and we didn't include any information on assessing the town's existing parks or any other park sites that may have been evaluated. So we tried to take a step back and go back to the drawing board. The town engaged a consultant, an art consultant, to review the town's existing infrastructure and potential improvements that could be done to those facilities to improve capacity in the 10-year timeframe to account for growth. And from that, we came up with these 6 projects. So you'll see that the first 2 may be familiar. That's what we came to you with in the spring, which is essentially acquiring and developing a new park at the northwest waterfront of the lake. So based on our consultation with council and town staff and the public, we determined that the existing park space that the town has is generally adequate for the existing population, but that with additional growth, additional park space needs to be added to kind of maintain the current level. So that's why we have left the this new park site in the DCCs, and this is why we're able to put 100% of that cost of acquiring the land toward development. It's basically a direct correlation. We've got this additional population coming in the next 10 years, and we need additional park space. This is the park space that has been identified. So it's 100% attributed to growth. The remaining projects, so development of that parkland, as well as improvements to Lions Park, Community Park, Rotary Beach, and Kinsman Splash Park, those are all seen as benefiting the existing population and growth equally over the next 10 years. So you'll see here we have our project cost estimates. Acquisition of that parkland is 100% attributed to growth, and the remaining are that 10.4% equally benefiting existing population and growth in the next 10 years. We have a municipal assist factor of 1%, quite hefty DCC reserves for parks, and our cost per capita for the parks DCC comes to $1,380. So to summarize all those numbers, this is our proposed DCCs based on those projects that we just went through. So these numbers, the total DCC number is very comparable to what we presented to you in the spring and what we presented to developers at our public engagement session. You'll see there's no, Councillor Mattis?
Councillor Mattis, do you have a question? I think you're on mute.
I'll continue.
Okay.
So there's no parks DCCs for commercial, institutional, and industrial. And you'll see the largest one here is roads, which is largely attributed to the additional bridge crossing. So looping back to the existing DCCs, in 2007, if we look at the single family one at the top, current DCCs are around 7,500. If we inflated that with construction cost, comes to close to 11,000, whereas we're proposing about 9,200. So when you compare it to 2007, it is quite a jump, but if we compare it with inflation, it's quite a bit more reasonable. There is a bit of a jump for the commercial and industrial, which is based on there's quite a bit of recent development in those areas, and this is a little bit more of a competitive rate compared to other municipalities. Again, taking that single family one as an example, I've compared with similar land use categories in other municipalities. You can see at the top, it shows the median. We're below that, comparable to municipalities such as Salmon Arm, Soyuz, Keremeos, and Summerland. So the next steps here, subject to any questions and things that come out of today, following first, second, and third reading, this will go to the Inspector of Municipalities for approval. Following that, we may make some revisions. It's not uncommon through that process. And once it is approved, it will come back to council for final reading and adoption. Again, I stated it earlier in the presentation that the best practices guide from the province does recommend minor amendments annually, basically adjusting for inflation and if there's any grant funding that becomes available for these projects, so that these DCCs are most likely increasing slightly every year, so that when we come around to 2031, it won't be such a big change in the DCCs like we're proposing today. So thank you very much for your time. I'll probably hand it back to Randy for any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Mattis, you got your hand up?
Yes, I do, Your Worship. I looked through all of the projects and I have no issues with water, sewer, and roads, but I still maintain my concerns with our park DCCs. When I looked at the previous report versus this report, I saw the differences. I don't have the reports in front of me because of the computer setups. I do have our council agenda on my other computer, but through our website, the report is not on there, so it's not reviewable that way. But I went to page 24 and it referred to of the technical report and referred to park space of 8 acres per 1,000 population. Our parks master plan, including the rural calculations, are based on a population of 9,950 people. I raised this last time that we're counting the rural people in our calculations here. They don't contribute to our parks. We shouldn't be counting them in there. We get no contribution from them. Our population, based on these projections, is 5,721, which equals 45.76 acres of park, 18.5 hectares approximately. Currently, we have 31.5 hectares. So we're already over parked. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm against acquiring the park at Tuckalnuit, because I think for the longer term, absolutely, we should be acquiring that park. But I still go back to, we're calculating things incorrectly here, and to calculate the acquisition on the basis of an increased population is just false, because we are already overparked for our population. On that, within those projects, so as I say, I would support the DCCs for the acquisition and development of the park at the north end of Tuckalnuit Lake. But the maintenance and infrastructure projects that are listed are all done by Parks and Recreation. Those are not our parks. They belong to Parks and Rec. We may own the land, but they manage the parks. They tax independent of us to maintain the infrastructure and the needs of those parks. That's not our role to do that. All of those projects, except the Tuckalnuit, are funded by them. We have no mechanism to move funds from our DCC charges to fund these projects. They would be funded by Parks and Rec at tax time. And each year when they decide to do the projects and improvements on each of these parks, they will tax us and they will tax the people in Area C, so that everybody pays for these parks because everybody gets to use them. Those things should not be involved in our calculation. In actuality, we should be asking the RDOS for their share of purchasing the park at the north end of Tuckalnuit Lake as well, but we'll leave that for another day. Totals in our last report, and again, I'm at a disadvantage here because I don't have the reports in front of me and no way of getting them. In the last report for the Tuckalnuit Park, the DCCs recoverable were 1.485 million, less the reserves at the time was 728,828, which left a balance of $756,172 with a population of 573. That works out to $1,321 as you have in your report. The total for in the new one, the total for the Tuckalnuit Park is $1,391, $1,391,316. Less the reserves of 878 leaves a net of 513,000. Using the new population increase numbers, because it changed from the last report. Last time it was 573, now it's 593. That works out to DCCs of $865. That's a $500 difference thereabouts on our DCCs. I think it's very important for council to remain competitive with other jurisdictions. If we want to attract development here, We want to be cost effective as we can. Having those projects that belong to Parks and Rec in our DCC budget is just fundamentally wrong. And so as it stands, I would ask that it be sent back to staff for a reworking of the numbers in the parks. I don't think they understood the problem the last time around, and they have not corrected the problem. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Councillor Mattis. CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to the Tuckalnuit, proposed Tuckalnuit Park area, it's been kept in there due to the fact that it's identified in the OCP by the community as having a park. So it wasn't based on the population per se. It was based on the fact that it has been identified in our OCP that we want this to be dedicated parkland. So that's how it became. When we looked at, because we reviewed a couple of reports from the Parks and Recreation that they had on the Parks Master Plan. And when they did the revised one, they indicated that use of population is no longer something that is done, but you look at what's in your OCP. And so that park has been identified in the OCP, and that's why we continue to keep it in the DCC bylaw. With regards to the improvements that were identified when we looked at the other report that was provided by Parks and Recreation, it was identified in there that DCC bylaw, our DCCs could be used by the town and also Area C for doing those improvements. So when we looked at that, that's why we felt that we should put them in there so that when those projects do come forward, then they do qualify under DCCs, and our share of that cost for those improvements could come out of our DCCs to cover those costs. So that's why they were also included in the bylaw that's in front of you now.
I understand everything that the CAO has said, and I don't want to get into a debate, but the taxation for Parks and Rec goes through the RDOS. We have no control over that. So their annual budget, as it has been and always will be, is through a taxation basis. It's not through DCCs. In spite of what they might wish or hope for, there is no mechanism at this time for us to do that, to give them a lump sum. We are taxed through the RDOS. And I understand how the Tuckalnuit Park got on there. I like having the Tuckalnuit Park on there. Doesn't matter how it got there, it's the right decision. But in terms of the projects, they should not be funded this way. They should be funded through Parks and Rec, through their taxation to both parties, Area C and the town.
Councillor Bentamila.
Thank you. So I had a question that I think was just answered, but I'm just going to ask for it to be answered again because I don't know if I'm totally clear. And my question was just exactly regarding the conversation that's happening. How, because this is the first time that I think we've seen all of these parks that are managed by Parks and Rec on this sort of master plan. How does Parks and Rec access those funds? And so I believe the CAO just answered that, but I'd just like for it to be described again so that I can be clear, because I as well am under the impression, or just the way things generally function, is that we're taxed through the regional district.
Through the chair, Doug, are you still on this meeting?
And actually, just while we're waiting to see if Doug's still on the meeting, the second part of my question, I had to look down at my notes to remind myself, is if that is something that is doable, if Parks and Rec accessing DCC funds is doable, how do we balance their potential asks against our desire to save for that Tuckalnuit Lakefront Park?
CFO?
Doug? I can't hear you.
How about now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, the Parks and Rec is funded. Councillor Mattis is quite right. The Parks and Rec is co-funded through the regional district on a basis of assessed values. Now that goes back in history and the start of the Parks and Rec with sharing with Area C in the town of Oliver. You know, that quite frankly could be changed, but that's a topic for another day, I suppose. But right now we do fund it through taxation, and whereby the society, or I shouldn't say society, they're operated under a management contract to the regional district. The regional district does have a say in the budget of the, I shouldn't say, the town of Oliver has a say in the budget of the Oliver Parks and Rec at the regional district board, just as Area C does. So there definitely is a say at the board. The funding mechanism for the park, however, probably the best way to go, just because we have the sharing with the Area C, we would definitely want in the present form, and this has been for many, many years, we would presently want Area C to contribute to that Tukwilnuit Park if they so desire. If they choose not to, then the town, of course, has to go it alone and to fund that park, which is quite a one-off, shall I say, because that has not occurred in the past. Usually we're very good partners with Area C, with the regional district, but certainly, you know, like anything in a marriage, things always can change, and one party can disagree or agree. So anyway, hopefully I might have muddied the waters a bit, but I'll leave it at that.
If that was in response to my question, I'm going to jump in again because I appreciate the answer, but that wasn't really the question. So the question is that in this iteration of the DCC bylaw, we've seen the addition of, like we're looking on the screen right now at Rotary Beach, Lions Park, a couple of parks that are managed by Parks and Rec. So if they are on our DCC list and therefore presumably can access DCC funds, how do they do that? Is that even possible with our current model of funding for Parks and Rec through the regional district?
I will answer that. I don't believe, well, anything's possible, but is it likely? I would say not. And the reason why is the regional district doesn't have DCCs. So the town of Oliver would be collecting DCCs for development within its own boundaries, with no other share coming from Area C. And until such time as Area C develops a development cost charge bylaw for a specific area of Area C, which I probably think is highly unlikely, the likelihood of Area C ever participating in putting money forward, unless it was some sort of grant or specified area bylaw, which is possible, I can't see it moving forward through DCC. It can move forward in a different way, but not DCCs.
So then final follow-up to that one question, just to be super specific and super simplistic. So again, we're looking at Rotary Beach. Say Parks and Rec proposes a $1 million upgrade to Rotary Beach. Area C shares 50%, our shares 50%. Can we pay our 50% out of our DCC fund, or does it have to be paid through our normal taxation route if this is a regular budget request?
I would think that town of Oliver could definitely pay it through our 50%, but the answer, I guess, then would be back to you, would be what's a guarantee that they're going to come up with their share?
I'm going to jump in just with regards to that question, because this happened when we did the upgrade to the arena, and Area C used their gas tax funds, and they didn't want a requisition for that. And then we had to turn around And we had to collect those funds through taxation because all of the funds would have come out of that, that requisition at that point in time. And because Area C used gas tax funds, we couldn't use that particular bylaw or the requisition to requisition funds for that particular thing. We had to actually put it as a line item, a one-time line item of $250,000 on our tax notice, and attribute it to the upgrade to the arena. So if one party chooses not to use the tax requisition that is set by the regional district, the other party can't use it because all of the funds would come out of that the way it is. So long story, short answer is it wouldn't be possible to not to use the requisition amounts. It would have to be through the requisition amounts for both parties to do this if there's no DCCs in Area C. Does that make sense?
Sorry, does that mean that they cannot access the DCCs because Area C does not have DCCs?
I would say yes.
So if they can't access DCCs, then there's no point having them in our DCC bylaw for that particular, for those functions. Acquisition of the parkland at the end, I totally support. But in terms of the maintenance, that's a shared function and it's just such muddy water. We need to stay out of it.
You still have your hand up, Councillor Mattis?
I do, because I'm in order to move this forward, I think I need to make the motion that this be sent back to staff for review and correction before it comes back for first, second, and third reading. There's no panic on getting this done, but it needs to be fixed. Those items need to be removed from the bylaw and then brought back to council. So I would make the motion that be referred back to staff for further information.
I just weigh in here a bit. I'm just looking for something a little more specific than that, Councillor Mattis. What exactly, I think we've sent this back a couple times and it comes back still not meeting the bar. What are we actually asking to be removed and not part of DCCs? Or we're still going to have some parks DCs, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. The park DCCs for the acquisition of the north end of Tuckalnuit and development of north end of Tuckalnuit, those would absolutely stay. But anything that relates to shared services with Parks and Rec and Area C would be removed.
And those are existing shared services.
Well, all of the ones that are listed in this bylaw, again, I don't have it in front of me. I don't have the technical bulletin in front of me because there's no way to access it at the same time as doing this meeting. But in that schedule of things for parks, there were like 5 things, and I maybe Alyssa can bring it back up on the screen again if she's still able to screen share.
You might be able to just say any park improvements to
council deferred development back to staff for further information, removing park DCC specific to shared services with Area C.
I think it would be park improvement DCCs.
It'd be park improvement DCCs, any park improvement or maintenance or, but not the acquisition or development. It's basically everything that was on that list that Alyssa had up on the screen, except regarding it's the first 2 items. That's all that should be in there. What was there before?
You could say removal of parks projects P3 through P6. It's Lions Park, Community Park, Rotary Beach, and Kinsman Splash Park.
What are P1 and P2? Oh, those are the acquisition and development, right? So we're
Yeah.
P3 to 6. Yeah, no, that
Tuckalnuit
That
Lake
works.
Acquisition Development.
works. I don't really need further information. It just, and I don't know whether we can make that amendment even tonight and then do first, second, and third. I don't know. I don't have it in front of me. I have no way of seeing it. But that's what I'm asking for, is that it just be for the acquisition development of Tuckalnuit.
So it shouldn't be deferred, it should be referred it back to staff. And it's really hard to do something tonight because the costs all change.
Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Worship. Just to note, there are some parks, I believe, that are Town of Oliver only, such as Bridge Park and possibly what might happen on Station Street. So should those be included into the DCC designations? I think it's a good idea to take out P3 through P6, but perhaps any future improvements to Bridge Park or a park on Station Street should be included.
CAO. Oh.
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand last time.
It would be challenging to update the numbers because it adjusts everything, but I could let you know at least if we did remove projects P3 through P6, it would drop the per capita Parks DCC by about $500. So where we had proposed, for example, single family 1 land use, that proposed DCC was about $9,200. By removing those 3 projects, it's now about $8,000. So drops by about $1,200. So that's just an example of the kind of impact that it would have to the overall DCCs.
Councillor Mattis.
I did the calculation earlier today and came up with the same approximate $500. It would move parks down to $865 and make us more competitive with neighboring communities at the same time.
Well, I have a motion on the table. Would anybody like to second it? Councillor Ventimiglia.
Sorry, before you just said that, I was trying to get my hand up. I was just going to chime in and add on to what Councillor Schwarzenberger said. I don't know if his question or comment was answered or spoken to. We don't look at these DCCs very often, and I know the idea is to look at them more often, but we wouldn't want to sell ourselves short and cut things off by not, looking ahead just a little bit to where we may be looking to do other future, Oliver parks then, not community parks. I mean, the DCCs, I don't think they were ever on the list, but the DCCs in the past couple of years have funded quite a few linear parks in town, and as well as Bridge Park, which is a great new addition. So I think that perhaps just a little bit of brainstorming is in order before we come back, hopefully for the final time with the hopefully final revision, to make sure that we have all that we need to have, or all that we should have on the list. Because I understand the desire for all of us to keep our DCCs as low as possible and to keep them competitive, and to do our part in attracting attracting business to the community, attracting growth, keeping costs on our end low. But we have to balance that with the future needs of the community. And so I just want to make sure that we're looking in all of the places that we should be looking before we hopefully see our final revision.
Thanks, Councillor Ventimiglia. I'm just wondering if the place to look for anything else would be in the OCP. We talked about this being referenced back to the OCP, and I'm not sure if there is anything else in the OCP that talks about future parkland, even though we're looking at Station Street and what might happen there. We haven't really made any decisions on that. And is that in the OCP at this point in time, or?
No.
No, so I'm just wondering how we would do that, speculating. It may be better to move forward with what we know today with a commitment to review this, in a couple years. I'll ask Councillor Grice. She had her hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I'd have to go back to Parks and Rec, because I know that they've amended their budget again to find out if the Parks Master planning went back into there or not, because that might be something that we want to take a look at as well. And I just want to ask too, because it seems like we've pulled out all of the parks improvements, but is it, and I question if it's that clear cut that DCCs can't be used for improvements, and if so, why was it in the bylaw in the first place? I mean, if True Consulting had determined initially that DCCs could be used for improvements, and I'm questioning again if it's that clear cut that they can't be used at all for improvements. If I can answer that, please. Thank you.
Can anyone answer Councillor Grice's question? CEO?
Thank you, Your Worship. When we went back the last time to review everything under parks, and we did look at their master plan that they had, and plus we also looked at the revised or the updated master plan review that happened, as well as any park. They had a document for park improvements that they had developed that outlined different things that they wanted to do in all the parks, etc. And when we were reading through it, it talked to the use of DCCs from the town of Oliver and electoral area C to provide funding for those improvements. Doug has now said that Area C doesn't have DCCs, and it was identified by Councillor Mattis that funding through to Parks and Recreation comes through the tax requisition, which both parties have to use in order to provide funding to the Parks and Recreation.
So the parks improvement projects were in the DCC bylaw initially based on.
No, they got put in this
plan?
last time around.
But that was based on the parks master plan? That's how they.
It was based on an improvement plan that they had developed.
Okay, which had.
And we reviewed it at that point in time.
Okay, okay.
And my question to the to True, when we were looking at it, because it was identified as using DCCs, I asked if that was something that they could incorporate into the DCC bylaw.
So to clarify there, parks improvements are eligible for DCCs, where improvements, there are limitations in the best practices guideline of what constitutes as an eligible improvement. So we reviewed these projects identified in the improvement plan and determined what costs could be eligible. Whereas from today's discussion, I think it's been clear that for other reasons related to those specific parks, that those funds wouldn't be able to be charged with DCCs. So parks improvement projects are eligible Just these particular ones, it appears that they wouldn't be.
Okay, so I wonder if perhaps we need to change the wording of the motion then, if some parks improvement projects could be funded by DCCs, but not specifically these ones.
I would ask the CAO again, but my thinking on that is unless we've got anything identified, without being able to put a specific project in there to charge a DC2, I don't know how we can include it in our DCC bylaw. And that would, I guess, a comment for me and more a question that I'm understanding this correctly.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it's Doug, CFO. Just maybe to hopefully try to clarify it. If the parks improvement projects are included in the DCC bylaw, what in fact is going to happen is double taxation. Now, I know a DCC isn't direct taxation to a town resident, but it is a taxation to the development community. And then what will happen is through the requisition at the regional district, the town will be levied again a charge based on assessed value of the park improvement, whatever portion that is. So once again, the town's gonna be paying their portion. So to have the park, and Alyssa's quite right, certainly park improvements can be in a DCC bylaw, but what's unique with the town of Oliver is how it actually, who pays for it. And that is the challenge that's happening, because currently the town will go ahead, we'll put our money in, and in all good faith, whether it be through DCC or just by, as CAO said, for the arena. But the question then is, how is the regional district going to pay? Because they have to pay it through a requisition of taxes, of which the town participates equal on assessed value. So that's the challenge. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Grice, did you get the answer you were looking for?
Yeah, I think I'm there now. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify for Councillor Schwarzenberger and Councillor Grice both, if those projects, improvements or whatever the case may be, were identified, and if we were to move ahead with the something on Station Street, regardless of whether it's in the OCP or not, does not prevent us from putting it into a development cost charge bylaw. And we can, even though we're on a 10 or 15 year cycle with this, if we were to do something like that, we could immediately bring it back to council, add it into the DCC bylaw and amend the bylaw. We can amend the bylaw at any time, just as we are looking at doing now. So if it came up next year, we can amend the bylaw next year, even though it's not part of the 10-year cycle.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. Councillor Schwarzenberger?
Thank you, Your Worship. That was basically my point is I think we need to look at this DCC bylaw more often, not from 2007 till now. Maybe yearly or every other year, we should be looking at this and seeing if there's other projects that have to be added, or there's projects that are in there that have changed and have to be deleted. So I'm happy with the motion that's been moved there, and I will second it. And I think we should go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schwarzenberger. Councillor Ventimiglia?
I'm good. I must have had a leftover hand.
Okay.
Thanks.
We got a motion that's moved and seconded. Had a good discussion. Is there any further discussion or questions? Not seeing any. I will ask the question. Does anybody object to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Moving to business, item 1, packing house lane options feedback. I'll pass this over to the Director of Operations, whose report is attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. having some technical difficulties tonight. So this report is to provide council with the public feedback in regards to proposed intersection and laneway changes at Packing House Lane. Staff have summarized the recent feedback that we received and have broken it down into 4 categories in order for council to review people's opinions and options chosen. To recap the options, option 1 that we had previously proposed to council was closing down the laneway and develop a multi-use pathway with lighting and some landscaping. This involved extending the North Mall exit right to Co-op Avenue and still allowing turning off and on to Co-op in either direction, eliminating vehicles from stopping before the laneway and then moving forward again to Co-op Avenue before turning, which is difficult for people that aren't used to it. Option 2 was keeping the vehicle laneway open and reconstructing and resurfacing it. This option closed all access to Co-op Avenue. A median island would no longer allow vehicles to enter the mall entrance from Co-op coming eastbound, or and you wouldn't be able to turn onto Co-op from the mall the north entrance. Vehicles turning off Main Street could access the mall entrance and use the laneway to access Airport Street around the mall still though. The other 2 options I put, no changes to the intersection and laneway. This was not a specified option, but some feedback we received did hint or suggest that nothing should be done at the intersection of Packing House Lane and Co-op Avenue for various reasons. And other options, these were comments from people not specified or any of the options, but people gave their feedback on other areas or problems that should be taken care of instead of the proposed changes noted for Packing House Lane. So in the report, if council must have read some of the comments and stuff, but I've gone through, I tallied the results and I show them in the report. Options chosen by the public. Option 1, the multi-use pathway. There were 30 people in favor of that option. And option 2, the vehicle laneway, to keep that open and make that work. 25 were in favor, so it was fairly close. No changes to the intersection and laneway. What I can interpret from the comments was there were about 10 of those, and other options, which were various opinions, there were about 8 of those as well. And so I have put some options for council. And option 1 would be to go with option 1, that council directs staff to proceed with option 1 that incorporates a multi-use pathway and shut down a portion of Packing House Lane. And option 2 would be council directs staff to proceed with option 2 that incorporates intersection changes and keeps Packing House Lane open to vehicle traffic. And then there's a third option that council directs staff to leave the proposed changes at the intersection the way they are, I guess, and develop only around the new development at 5931 Airport Street, or that council refer back to staff for more information on proposed changes. And unfortunately, I just don't have the dollar figures for option 3 at this point right now. I can't access my computer at work or the network right now. And but it would, if council decided to go that route and just do the improvements around the development, it would save several $100,000s of dollars, but I just don't have that number right now. But during budget deliberations, we can discuss further if needed.
You, Director. Councillor Grice.
Thank you, Worship. I kind of lost the last little bit of what Sean said there, but I think I caught the gist of it. But just a couple of comments for me, just looking over the diagrams here. I'm still in favor of option 1. I think for me personally, all along, this has just been a safety issue. I've had so many close calls at that intersection with people not understanding the two-stop system or just don't care and blow right through it and make a left-hand turn, or, you know, you've got cars coming from so many different directions, and I feel that it's really unsafe. I don't have strong feelings either way regarding closing the packing house lane. However, I don't think there's any detriment. I know there were some comments about trucks not being able to access the loading dock. However, going and looking at it myself, I don't see any difference in their access based on where that driveway is. So I would be in favor of option 1, but looking forward to hear what my colleagues have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. My two support option 1, the only concern that I had, I pulled it out of a couple of the comments that were made there regarding visibility at Similkameen and Airport, and also the having to do with the trucks. When I look at the drawing for option 1, although it doesn't go to the far end of Airport Street, I would ask that we engineer this without the bump outs so that it'll be easier for trucks going around that bend off of Packing House Lane onto Airport, and also with the visibility issues at the other end of Airport and Similkameen, that the bump outs be eliminated there as well. There may be cost savings as a result of that. Doing that, it will also provide, and I also think that we should engineer the street as wide as possible on Airport Street through that area, just because there may be more parking required and just greater ease of access for the larger trucks that do use that particular area for deliveries. So other than that, I would absolutely support option 1, but I think those changes, we've gotten hung up on bump outs, and I'm not sure why we put them into every drawing. And somehow we're ending up with streets that are too narrow for modern vehicles.
Can I answer some of that?
Sure.
Some of that question.
Go ahead, Director.
Well, a lot of times the bump outs are proposed in order to make the pedestrian crossings a little bit safer. So it's always viewed as having less distance to cross and being more visible. So a bump out usually pushes the pedestrian out past a parked car, or at least in a line with the parked car. So I mean, it serves a purpose that way. But I do understand, and I was thinking about the bump outs at Similkameen, and there may be something that we can review to reduce and make it a little bit easier. I know when I discussed this with the engineer at True Consulting, that a lot of the larger trucks would enter Packing House Lane where Co-op, where BC Tree Fruits is, and then come up Packing House Lane and then onto Airport and back into the back of the mall there. And there were some discussions between our engineer and the Anthem Properties, and they seem to be okay with all of that now, and they actually don't mind option 1 any longer and with the laneway closed. They were always, sorry.
I understand the traffic flow you're talking about. I'm just concerned about the major bump out in the curve between Packing House Lane and Airport Street on the drawing that I see up on the screen now. That's a big bump out. And I think that'll make it more difficult and tighter for vehicles, for larger vehicles going around that corner if there's other traffic.
Well, they have done, when they engineered it, a larger semi will come over the yellow line a bit, but
exactly, and that's why I'm saying move the bump out further back, so that it gives the traffic somewhere to go if there's a semi doing that.
Yeah, and that could be discussed. Those are just little tweaks here and there, and I can discuss that with them and see if we can adjust that a little bit.
If you happen to get caught in there with a semi and it comes over that center yellow line, which it's quite likely to do with the radius of that turn, then you've got nowhere to go except up on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm suggesting push that bump out further back, almost eliminate it so that we can have a gentler turn there and room for people.
Yeah, that can be discussed with the engineering group. These aren't finalized drawings anyway, so.
I understand that, but other than that, it looks really good.
you, Councillor Mattis. Councillor Ventimiglia?
Sorry, it takes me a minute to get from agenda notes back to Zoom. So I guess so far it seems like we're all on the same page. When we first started talking about this, however long ago it was, a year-ish or something like that, I didn't understand the idea of closing Packing House Lane. But now seeing all of the options and reading through a lot of the comments, or reading through all the comments, I do think that it's the best option, along with everyone that's spoken so far. One of my main concerns at the beginning was the truck traffic, or those that would be using the loading area in behind the mall. And it seems that all of the major stores in the mall, as well as the ownership group itself, are supportive of option A. So clearly they've done their research, and I guess I just want to confirm that they've done their research, or that the research has been done, and we're not creating problems for those that use the back entrances for deliveries. So once that's confirmed, I do think it's the best option. I think it doesn't really matter what we do. This is going to be an adjustment for some people, potentially a lot of people. But to Councillor Grice's point right at the beginning, this intersection, it's all about safety. I mean, that's why we started talking about it in the first place. And that's why something needs to be done. It's a huge accident just waiting to happen. And I don't think we want to wait for it to happen. We want to do something while it's on our radar. And one thing, I just thought it was interesting. In a lot of the comments, there was people saying that they use Packing House Lane to avoid Main Street. So coming up Co-op, down Packing House Lane, across to Airport Street to get over to the other mall or to the other intersection. And I thought, wow. So I've lived here my whole life, and that has never once occurred to me. I always come down Station Street and go down Sawmill Road and come up, what is it called, Similkameen Avenue, and turn left on Airport Street. So that alternate path exists. It just exists, a block or so down the road on proper roads, wide enough for cars coming and going both ways. And so it will be an adjustment for people losing that option, but we're not pushing more traffic onto Main Street if those other routes are explored a bit more.
Thank you, Councillor Ventimiglia. Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Worship. I agree with everyone that's spoken thus far. Option one is my favorite option. I think since the mall tenants and the owner of the mall are in favor of that option as well, I think it's really a no-brainer. And I did read through all of the comments, and I think while I understand that some people may not want to be on Main Street, it's Main Street for a purpose, and that's the main way to get people north-south through town. So if you're looking ways to skirt it, I don't really think that that's a big issue. I think there's lots of ways to get around town, and people should use Main Street. That's what it's there for. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Schwarzenberger. I will weigh in and make it unanimous. I do feel option one is definitely the best option. The mall tenants and the mall owner are in favor of it. And I think it's important that people understand that this isn't just something out of nowhere. This is being done to support the affordable housing project that's taking place on Airport Street. And some of it's going to be paid by DCCs. It's not just a frill, a taxation frill to make a change for the sake of change. It actually is going to make this area much more functional, a lot safer for everybody involved. And I think it's going to be a big improvement to the area. And the development there is definitely spurring this need. So I'm in favor of option one. Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you, Your Worship. There was just one other comment that I just wanted to ask about, and I forgot to bring it up. So there was just in one of the comments, somebody mentioned no attention being given to commercial truck parking that will no longer be available after this upgrade. I didn't know there was commercial truck parking in that area, but I just want to make sure or ask if anybody knows what that's referring to.
I was going to say I can weigh in on that. If you drive by there, Councillor Ventimiglia, you'll see a large number of semis parked there. I'm not sure what they're doing there, whether they're just parked there and overnighting or what's going on, but there is a lot of semis that are being parked there. Director of Operations, I think, might have a comment on that as well. With the development that's going in there, it's going to be a place where they're going to have to find another place to park.
I was going to mention the same thing, and yeah, once that the first 46 units goes in, and there's going to be more pedestrian traffic, and yeah, you can't have semis parking on those properties anyways. At that point, there'll be curb and gutter, and then especially when the second phase goes in, so they'll have to find alternative areas to park their trailers.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Ventimiglia?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll move option 1.
I'll second.
Moved and second that council direct staff to proceed with option 1 that incorporates a multi-use pathway and shut down a portion of Packing House Lane. Any further discussion? I will call a question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion carries. Moving to item 2, this is the notice of motion that I brought forward at the committee of the whole meeting on November 9th, and it was the reason that I brought the motion forward was for us to have a look at our business tax in the town of Oliver. The last time this was done was in 2012, where the council of the day put a strategy in place to reduce the tax multiplier down to 2.45, trying to shift a bit of the tax burden from commercial over to residential in an effort to reduce the tax burden on commercial and make the town of Oliver a little more competitive. That multiplier of 2.45 has been in place now for 5 years. I guess this will be the 5th year that it's been in place. And typically what can happen when you keep a multiplier in place is that your tax burden doesn't necessarily stay in place as well, because as your appraisals a change in classes differently, your tax burden can actually shift back to what you were trying to avoid in the first place. So what I'd like to have is an analysis done on this, where we're at with our tax burden for our business class compared to residential. I'd like to see where we're at in comparison to other neighboring municipalities, and have this ready for our 2021 general budget discussions. And as part of a consideration in those discussions, we may want to look at our business tax rate and make some adjustments to that, and maybe shift the tax burden around. But without that information, we don't have that, we won't be able to have that discussion. So that's why I brought the motion forward. That in preparation of the 2021 general budget discussion, staff bring forward a report outlining the business tax multiple strategy adopted by council in February 2012. The goal of the strategy was to shift the tax burden from business to residential. As such, the report should include an analysis of any shift in tax burden amongst these two property classes, and that the report include a description of alternative tax distribution methods used amongst property classes, including pros and cons, and that the report include a competitive comparison analysis of business tax rates in Oliver to that of neighboring municipalities. And I will move that motion and ask if there's anyone that would like to second it.
I would second that.
Councillor Mattis has seconded. Any discussion, questions on why I'm asking this or what it means? Councillor Mattis?
Really no questions or discussion really. I just wanted to make the point that when we passed this in 2012, and I was at the table, there was no strategy in place. It was just simply we felt that the tax burden on the commercial industrial was too high and that it needed to be lowered. So we just said, let's change it, and we did. There was no actual strategy. So it makes perfect sense to have a look at what the effect was and whether we should be going one direction or the other. I don't know what will come out of the report, and I don't want to predict, but I think it'll be good either way.
I would agree. Is there any other comments? Discussion? If not, I will ask the question. Does anyone object to the motion? The motion is carried. Moving on to correspondence. The November 23rd correspondence report. I'll pass this over to the corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the correspondence report for November 23rd, there's one item for information from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch regarding Policy Directive 2028. This is to extend the authorization for distilleries, breweries, and wineries to manufacture, package, sell, and donate alcohol-based hand sanitizer and sanitizer. So the motion before council is that the correspondence listed in item K2, which is what I just noted, and that the weekly mail be received. Thank you.
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved, seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will ask, does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. There's one more item, corporate officer.
Yes, there is, Your Worship. I can speak to that. Oliver Parks and Recreation sent a email to the Chief Administrative Officer today. They're seeking a letter of support from council with regards to a grant application that they're making to Tree Canada for $10,000 called the TREEmendous Communities Grant. And this is to provide additional trees in communities across Canada. Their proposal is to plant 100 flowering trees and bushes as part of Oliver's or Greater Oliver Centennial celebrations. And they hope to plant bee and butterfly related lilacs and flowering trees to create a beautiful space. They've noted in the drawing below their email of community park adjacent to the ball diamonds there. I would think that the letter of support should speak to our tree management plan, and the Director of Operations may have a comment with regards to this request.
The proposal that they're showing is on Parks and Recs park, so we don't have any tree inventory on there.
Okay. So the motion before council is that council direct staff to provide a letter of support to Oliver Parks and Recreation Society for the TREEmendous Communities Grant.
Thank you, corporate officer. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Worship. Through to the corporate officer, do you know if there's any matched funding required or if it's 100% grant funded?
Sorry, I don't know. They don't mention it, so I don't expect that to be. It would be a matching through the Oliver Parks and Rec Society.
Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Worship. Actually, the corporate officer just answered the question. Any grant funding matching would come from Parks and Rec. I wonder if we could have, as part of this, and I know that maybe the Director of Public Works should reach out and we could get some of these across the street in Kinsman Park. I know it's not their park, and this goes back to the DCC discussion about who looks after what, but maybe we can also take advantage of some of this $10,000 and get Parks and Rec to invest in the town of Oliver as well. But I would make the motion that council direct staff to provide a letter of support to Oliver Parks and Rec Society for the TREEmendous Communities Grant.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Ventimiglia?
It's okay. I just always wait so patiently with my hand up. I was looking to move the motion because I think it's a good motion, but also I love the name of the grant. TREEmendous. That was very original.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will ask the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to reports, we've got the fire department activity report for October 2020.
I'll move receipt.
Second.
Seconded. Any further discussion? I'll ask the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Councillor reports now. Councillor Ventimiglia?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple things to report this evening. I attended the special open budget meeting with the rest of council on Tuesday, November the 10th. Virtual Remembrance Day ceremonies on Wednesday, November the 11th. And as a virtual participant, I thought it was a beautiful ceremony and things were organized really well and looked extremely professional. So congratulations to the organizers and thank you for sharing that with us. And Tuesday, November the 17th, I attended an airport advisory committee meeting and that's the end of my report.
Thanks, Councillor Ventimiglia. Councillor Schwarzenberger?
Thank you, Your Worship. Tuesday, November 10th, the open water and sewer budget meetings, and November 11th, the Remembrance Day celebrations. That's it for me.
Thanks, Councillor Schwarzenberger. Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Your Worship. Tuesday, November 10th, the water and sewer budget deliberations. Wednesday, November 11th, the virtual Remembrance Day ceremony. Thursday, November 12th was the Oliver is 100 think tank meeting. So we discussed the results of the questionnaire, our feedback from the questionnaire, as well as had a preliminary branding discussion. So that will be ongoing. Monday, November 16th was an Oliver Parks and Recreation Society meeting. They're no longer facing a deficit situation due to the CEWS. Which is good news. Motion was passed to present the revised budget to RDOS and council, and the ask is 0.155% increase. Motion passed to ask the RDOS to establish an operational reserve bylaw, knowing that the CEWS will be reduced over the next year so that they can prepare for that. Wednesday, November 18th, I took a suicide alertness training called Safe Talk, which was funded by the Canadian Mental Health Association and hosted by Parks and Recreation. The course was to recognize invitations and connect with a person who's having thoughts of suicide and to help connect them to intervention sources. So I was given this sticker. I don't know if you can see that, but if you are having thoughts of suicide and you see someone displaying this sticker, that is someone who you can speak to and they can help make connections for interventions for you. Thursday, November 19th, I attended the Movember Ladies Night fundraiser, which was hosted by the Fire Hall Brewery. So they're doing a great job fundraising all month for Movember. And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. Budget meeting on the 10th. The Remembrance Day I attended down at Town Hall. It was there was actually quite a few people socially distancing all around the square down there. It was kind of nice. Airport advisory on the 17th, and the Okanagan Regional Library Board meeting on the 18th. And that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. November 10th, I was at the water sewer budget discussions as well. November 11th, I took part in the Remembrance Day ceremony. The sun came out. It ended up being a very nice morning, and we did have one flyover on that day as well. November 18th, the Heritage Committee meeting, and November 12th and 13th, 19th, and 20th have been RDOS meetings, a strategic planning meeting, two budget meetings and 1 was a board meeting. And that concludes my report. Our next regular meeting of council is December 14th, 2020. And the acting mayor schedule for November, the rest of November is Councillor Ventimiglia, and December is Councillor Schwarzenberger. Public question period. If there's any members of the public that wish to ask a question, please virtually raise your hand and you will be unmuted and provided an opportunity to speak to council. If anyone would like to or does have a question. Seeing no hands being raised, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved and second. I'll ask the question, does anyone object? We are adjourned. Thank you, council.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Good night.